Welcome to Legends of Humanity, the international history channel where we relive the lives of the greatest figures who changed the course of the world. In today's journey, we dive into the extraordinary life of Alexander the Great, the military genius of ancient Greece, who conquered nearly the entire known world of his time. From a young Macedonian prince to the commander who crushed the mighty Persian Empire and reached the edges of India, Alexander was more than a warrior. He was a living symbol of ambition, strategy, and the human drive to go beyond all limits. A prince of Macedonia, the birth of a legend in the year 356 BC, in the ancient city of Pella, the capital of the kingdom of Macedon, a child was born whose destiny would reshape the world. This was Alexander, son of King Philip II and Queen Olympias. Macedon, though nestled in the rugged lands north of Greece, was rapidly asserting its power under the cunning and ambitious hand of Philip. Yet, even amidst the rising political tides, Alexander's birth was heralded by portents and whispers of greatness, suggesting a future far grander than that of a mere prince. Legend tells of a dream his mother had where a thunderbolt struck her womb, igniting a great fire that spread across the land, symbolizing the fiery spirit and vast reach of her unborn child. Alexander's childhood was steeped in the dual influences of the Macedonian royal court and the burgeoning Hellenic culture that Philip so admired. He was raised with the harsh realities of military life, horsemanship, hunting, and physical endurance, skills essential for a future king in a warrior society. Yet, he also exhibited an early and profound intellectual curiosity. From a young age, his piercing blue eyes and sharp mind sought knowledge, often questioning, dissecting, and analyzing, revealing a prodigious intellect that set him apart from his peers. He possessed an innate charisma, drawing others to him even as a boy, a trait that would later inspire armies to follow him to the ends of the known world. His education was meticulously planned by his father, Philip, who understood that true power lay not just in military might, but also in wisdom and cultural sophistication. When Alexander was around 13 years old, Philip made a decision that would profoundly shape his son's intellectual and philosophical outlook. He invited Aristotle, arguably the greatest philosopher of the ancient world, to tutor Alexander. For 3 years, Aristotle, along with a select group of noble Macedonian youths, imparted knowledge to the young prince at the Temple of the Nymphs at Mieza. Under Aristotle's tutelage, Alexander delved into a vast array of subjects: ethics, politics, rhetoric, medicine, and natural sciences. He studied Homer's Iliad, a work that captivated him deeply, reportedly sleeping with a copy under his pillow and holding Achilles as a personal hero. Aristotle instilled in him a love for Greek culture, a systematic approach to knowledge, and a keen appreciation for scientific observation. This rigorous intellectual training, combined with his innate military aptitude, forged a unique blend of scholar and warrior, a man whose ambition was matched only by his philosophical depth. Aristotle's teachings helped temper Alexander's fiery temperament with reason, shaping his perspective on governance and his understanding of diverse cultures. Even in his youth, Alexander demonstrated early signs of genius. At the age of 12, he famously tamed the wild, untamable horse Bucephalus, a feat that astonished his father and the court. While others saw a beast, Alexander perceived fear and approached the horse calmly, turning its head towards the sun to calm it before mounting. Philip, witnessing this display of courage, insight, and leadership, is said to have proclaimed, "My son, ask for thyself another kingdom, for Macedon is too small to hold thee." This anecdote, whether entirely factual or embellished by history, perfectly encapsulated Alexander's burgeoning abilities and foreshadowed his future conquests. As he matured, Alexander became increasingly involved in his father's campaigns. At 16, while Philip was away fighting, Alexander was left as regent of Macedon, demonstrating his early grasp of governance. At 18, he commanded the left wing of the Macedonian army at the Battle of Chaeronea, 338 BC, where Philip decisively defeated the combined forces of Athens and Thebes, securing Macedonian hegemony over Greece. His bravery and tactical acumen in this critical battle cemented his reputation as a formidable military leader even before inheriting his father's throne. The young prince, forged in the crucible of intellectual discipline and battlefield experience, was now ready to step onto the world stage, poised for a destiny that would forever link his name with unparalleled conquest and legendary achievement. The death of a king, ascending the throne at 20, the triumphs of Philip II, culminating in the decisive victory at Chaeronea, had firmly established Macedonian dominance over Greece. His ambitions, however, extended far beyond the Hellenic world. Philip harbored a grand design to lead a pan-Hellenic invasion of the Persian Empire, a colossal undertaking that would unite the Greek city-states under Macedonian leadership and avenge past Persian aggressions. As he meticulously prepared for this monumental campaign, the internal dynamics of the Macedonian court, always a viper's nest of intrigue, grew increasingly volatile. Alexander, now a young man of fiery spirit and immense talent, found himself in a complex and often strained relationship with his powerful father. While Philip admired his son's military prowess and intellect, he was also wary of Alexander's independent nature and the influence of his ambitious mother, Olympias. The relationship was further complicated by Philip's numerous marriages, particularly his union with Cleopatra Eurydice, a Macedonian noblewoman who bore him a son. This threatened Alexander's position as heir apparent, fueling a bitter rivalry between Olympias and Cleopatra and creating deep fissures within the royal family. A public altercation at Philip's wedding banquet, where Alexander and Olympias stormed out, highlighted the growing animosity and personal jealousies that festered beneath the surface of the Grand Macedonian court. In 336 BC, the stage was set for Philip's grand departure to Asia. He was preparing for his campaign, celebrating the marriage of his daughter Cleopatra to King Alexander I of Epirus, Olympias' brother. The city of Aegae, the ancient capital of Macedon, was abuzz with festivities and military preparations. It was a moment of apparent unity and triumphal celebration, yet beneath this veneer, deadly plots were brewing. As Philip entered the theater for the celebrations, a lone assassin, Pausanias of Orestes, a disgruntled former bodyguard, stepped forward and fatally stabbed the king. The assassination was swift and brutal, plunging the Macedonian court into chaos. Pausanias was immediately pursued and killed by other bodyguards, leaving the precise motives and orchestrators of the plot shrouded in mystery. Historians have debated for centuries whether Olympias, Alexander, or even Persian agents were involved, but no definitive evidence has ever surfaced to directly implicate any party. Regardless of the hidden hands, Philip's sudden and violent death marked an abrupt end to an era and opened the door for his son's ascent. The immediate aftermath of Philip's assassination was a precarious moment for Alexander. At just 20 years old, he faced the formidable challenge of ascending the throne in a kingdom known for its ruthless power struggles and internal dissent. The army, the nobility, and the various factions within the court could have easily plunged Macedon into civil war. However, Alexander acted with decisive speed and unyielding resolve. Supported by Antipater, his father's trusted general, and by the Macedonian army, Alexander swiftly consolidated his power. He eliminated potential rivals to the throne, including his cousin Amyntas IV and Philip's infant son by Cleopatra Eurydice, thereby securing his claim with a blend of legitimate succession and brutal pragmatism. He presented himself as the natural and legitimate heir, the one chosen by destiny to fulfill his father's ambitious plans. His charisma and proven military ability, demonstrated at Chaeronea, quickly won over the Macedonian army, whose loyalty was paramount. The soldiers, recognizing his leadership potential, hailed him as their king. Thus, within days of his father's tragic death, Alexander stood as the undisputed ruler of Macedon. The transition, though swift and bloody in its consolidation, allowed no time for widespread rebellion or for the various Greek city-states, now under Macedonian hegemony, to fully capitalize on the moment of instability. Alexander had not merely inherited a throne, he had seized it with the force of his personality and the calculated elimination of rivals. The world now held its breath, wondering what the young king, whose life had been shaped by both the brilliance and the darkness of his royal lineage, would do with the vast power that now lay in his hands. The foundations of a legend were now truly laid, awaiting the next chapter of conquest and consolidation. Fire and strategy, crushing revolts and securing Greece. Alexander's ascent to the Macedonian throne at the tender age of 20, following his father's assassination, was swift but not without immediate challenges. The Greek city-states, long resentful of Macedonian hegemony imposed by Philip II, saw the change of leadership as an opportunity to reclaim their autonomy. News of Philip's death and Alexander's youth sparked whispers of rebellion across the Hellenic world, threatening to unravel the fragile unity Philip had painstakingly forged. Alexander understood that his first act as king must be a decisive demonstration of strength, crushing any nascent revolts and re-establishing his authority over Greece. His initial campaign in Thessaly was a brilliant display of speed and psychological warfare. The Thessalians, who had considered themselves allies rather than subjects, expected a negotiation. Instead, Alexander arrived at their border with his army, forced a passage through the formidable Vale of Tempe, and appeared suddenly at their capital, Larissa. This unexpected swiftness stunned the Thessalians into submission. They immediately recognized him as their leader, just as they had recognized his father, and even granted him command of their forces. This rapid assertion of power sent a clear message across Greece. Alexander was not to be underestimated. Following Thessaly, Alexander convened the League of Corinth, the alliance of Greek city-states Philip had established. He skillfully reaffirmed his position as the League's hegemon leader, gaining their reluctant but official assent for his planned invasion of Persia. The delegates, initially skeptical of the young king, were swayed by his forceful presence, his clear strategic vision, and the veiled threat of his formidable army. He received the traditional oaths of loyalty, cementing his control over the Greek mainland. However, the most significant and dramatic test of his authority came from Thebes. While Alexander was campaigning in the north against the Thracian tribes and Illyrians' campaigns designed to secure Macedon's northern borders, and blood, his new army of false rumor spread through Greece that he had been killed. Thebes, a city with a proud military history and a deep desire for freedom, seized this opportunity to revolt. They expelled the Macedonian garrison from their citadel, the Cadmea, and called upon other Greek cities to join their cause. This was a direct challenge to Alexander's authority, a bold act of defiance that could, if left unpunished, ignite a widespread revolt across the Hellenic world. Alexander's response was swift, brutal, and strategically calculated. Rather than returning slowly, he undertook an astonishingly rapid march, covering hundreds of miles in a matter of days. This incredible speed caught the Thebans completely by surprise. They had expected him to be hundreds of miles away in their revolt to gather momentum. His sudden appearance at their city walls with a full Macedonian army shattered their illusions of safety and isolated their rebellion. Despite offers of a peaceful surrender, the Thebans, confident in their fortifications and historical resilience, refused. Alexander launched a devastating siege, which culminated in the city's storming. The ensuing crushing of Thebes was a horrifying but deliberate act designed to serve as a deterrent to any other Greek city contemplating rebellion. The city was razed to the ground, its fortifications dismantled, and its surviving inhabitants sold into slavery, with the exception of the priests, the house of the poet Pindar, and those who had opposed the revolt. This brutal example sent a chilling message across Greece. Defiance of Alexander would result in total annihilation. The destruction of Thebes achieved its intended effect, It secured Greece under Alexander's iron fist. No other Greek city-state dared to challenge his authority again. The League of Corinth remained subservient, and the Greek contingents reluctantly prepared to join his grand expedition against Persia. This ruthless act, while staining his early reign with a dark chapter of brutality, solidified his position as the unquestioned master of the Hellenic world. He had shown that he possessed not only his father's military genius, but also a colder, more unyielding determination. With Greece firmly under his control, Alexander was now free to turn his gaze eastward, towards the vast and wealthy Persian Empire, ready to embark on the campaign that would immortalize his name. Crossing the Hellespont into the Persian Empire with Greece firmly subjugated and his northern borders secured, Alexander's gaze, now sharpened by early triumphs, fixed upon the colossal empire that had long cast its shadow over the Hellenic world, Persia. This was not merely an act of conquest, but the fulfillment of his father Philip's grand designer pan-Hellenic crusade to avenge the Persian invasions of Greece a century and a half earlier. The vastness of the Persian Empire, stretching from the Aegean to India, was daunting. Yet Alexander, fueled by ambition and a belief in his divine destiny, saw it not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as a prize awaiting his grasp. The logistical challenge of invading such an empire was immense. Alexander had inherited a well-trained, disciplined, and innovative Macedonian army, meticulously honed by Philip II. This force comprised the formidable Macedonian phalanx, armed with long sarissas, elite companion cavalry, and skilled light infantry. He also commanded contingents from his Greek allies, though their loyalty was often more a matter of fear than genuine commitment. Alexander knew that success depended on meticulous planning, superior tactics, and the unwavering morale of his troops. In the spring of 334 BC, the grand expedition began. Alexander led his forces from Pella, marching through Thrace towards the Hellespont, modern-day Dardanelles. This narrow strait, separating Europe from Asia, was the symbolic gateway to his destiny. At Abydos, on the European side, he conducted a solemn sacrifice, marking the sacred nature of his enterprise. He then personally sailed across the Hellespont, reportedly throwing his spear into Asian soil to symbolize his claim to the continent by conquest, a dramatic gesture that resonated with his men. This was more than a military crossing. It was a psychological leap into a new theater of war, a declaration of intent to challenge the mightiest empire of the age on its own ground. Upon landing in Asia Minor, Alexander immediately visited the ancient city of Troy, a place imbued with heroic legend. He paid homage at the tomb of Achilles, his mythical ancestor and personal hero, further solidifying his image as a warrior destined for epic deeds. This act not only inspired his Greek allies, reminding them of the shared Hellenic heritage and the historical grievances against Persia, but also positioned himself as the inheritor of a grand heroic tradition. The Persian satraps, governors, in Asia Minor, under the command of Memnon of Rhodes, a skilled Greek mercenary general in Persian service, were aware of Alexander's advance. They opted for a strategy of scorched earth, hoping to deny the Macedonian supplies and force them into retreat. However, the satraps were too slow and indecisive, and Memnon's advice was largely ignored by the proud Persian nobles. The first major confrontation came at the Battle of the Granicus River. The Persian forces, consisting of cavalry and a significant contingent of Greek mercenaries, took up a strong defensive position on the far bank of the river, expecting to trap Alexander's army as it crossed. Alexander, displaying his characteristic audacity and tactical genius, launched a direct assault. Against the advice of his generals who suggested waiting until dawn, he led his companion cavalry across the river, charging directly into the teeth of the Persian defenses. The battle was fierce and bloody. Alexander himself was in the thick of the fighting, narrowly escaping death on several occasions. His personal courage and bold leadership inspired his men. The Macedonian phalanx, following the cavalry, systematically pushed the Persian infantry, while the companion cavalry engaged the Persian cavalry in a brutal melee. The Persian line eventually broke, their cavalry fleeing, and the Greek mercenaries in Persian service were largely slaughtered as a warning to other Greeks who might consider fighting for the enemy. The victory at Granicus was decisive. It was not just a military triumph, it was a psychological one. It demonstrated Alexander's superiority on the battlefield, solidified his army's confidence, and opened the door to the rest of Asia Minor. The path into the heart of the Persian Empire now lay open, and the grand campaign had truly begun. Clash of Kings, the Battle of Issus, and the Persian retreat. The victory at the Granicus River opened the gates of Asia Minor to Alexander. Rather than rushing headlong into the Persian heartland, he embarked on a strategic campaign to consolidate his control over the coastal cities. This was a calculated move to deny the formidable Persian navy its bases, thereby eliminating the threat to his supply lines and his Macedonian homeland. City after city, from Sardis to Miletus and Halicarnassus, fell to his forces, either by surrender or by siege. Alexander showed a pragmatic side, often offering lenient terms to those who submitted, but demonstrating ruthless efficiency against those who resisted. This meticulous groundwork laid the foundation for his deeper penetration into the Persian Empire. As Alexander advanced through Cilicia, word reached him of a massive Persian army gathering to meet him. King Darius III, the great king of Persia, had personally assembled an immense host, drawing soldiers from every corner of his vast empire. Estimates of Darius's army often reached hundreds of thousands, dwarfing Alexander's roughly 40 men. This was to be the true test, a direct confrontation between the king of Macedon and the king of kings, a clash that would determine the fate of empires. The two armies converged near the town of Issus on a narrow coastal plain bordered by mountains and the sea. Darius, in a move that would prove to be a fatal strategic blunder, chose this constricted terrain. His overwhelming numerical superiority, which would have been devastating on an open plain, was nullified by the narrow battlefield. The mountains on one flank and the sea on the other prevented him from deploying his vast forces effectively or encircling Alexander's smaller army. Alexander, always quick to capitalize on enemy errors, recognized this tactical advantage immediately. In November 333 BC, the Battle of Issus commenced. Darius commanded from the center, surrounded by his elite Persian immortals. Alexander, as always, led the charge, positioning himself on the right wing with his elite companion cavalry. The Macedonian phalanx, a solid wall of sarissas, held the center against the numerical might of the Persian infantry. The battle was a maelstrom of steel and blood. Alexander led a furious cavalry charge directly at the Persian left flank, punching a hole through their lines. His objective was clear: to reach Darius himself. As Alexander's cavalry pressed forward, aiming for the Persian center, Darius's charioteers and horsemen found themselves trapped and unable to maneuver in the confined space. Panic began to spread through the Persian ranks. Darius, seeing his personal guard collapsing and Alexander's forces rapidly approaching his position, made the fateful decision to flee. He mounted his chariot and galloped away, abandoning his army and, crucially, his entire family. His mother, Sisygambis, his wife Statira, and his two daughters, who were present in the Persian camp. The sight of their king fleeing shattered the morale of the Persian army. What had been an orderly, if fierce, engagement devolved into a chaotic rout. Thousands of Persian soldiers, trapped in the narrow passes, were cut down or trampled as they tried to escape. Alexander's victory was absolute and devastating for the Persians. The aftermath was almost as significant as the battle itself. Alexander captured the immense Persian royal baggage train and, to his astonishment, found Darius's family. He treated them with unexpected clemency and respect, a gesture that stood in stark contrast to the common practices of ancient warfare and further enhanced his reputation. He assured Darius's mother that they would be cared for, an act that earned him her lasting gratitude. This humane treatment of the royal captives not only reflected a degree of nobility, but also served a pragmatic purpose. It showcased Alexander as a cultured, magnanimous ruler, not a barbarian conqueror, potentially weakening Darius's standing among his own subjects. The Battle of Issus was more than just a military triumph. It was a profound psychological blow to the Persian Empire. It demonstrated beyond doubt Alexander's tactical genius and his unwavering personal courage, conclusively defeating Darius III in direct combat and proving himself a world-class general. Darius's flight was a humiliation that deeply eroded his authority and prestige. With this colossal victory, Alexander had not merely won a battle, he had shaken the very foundations of the Achaemenid Empire and opened the next formidable chapter of his relentless march eastward, conquering Tyre and Gaza, the gates to Egypt. After the monumental victory at Issus and the ignominious flight of Darius III, Alexander found himself in a commanding position. Rather than immediately pursuing the fleeing Persian king into the heart of his empire, Alexander chose a more strategic, albeit arduous, path. His next objective was to secure the Mediterranean coastline, effectively dismantling the Persian naval power that still posed a potential threat to his lines of communication and supply. This meant systematically capturing the wealthy Phoenician cities, renowned for their maritime prowess and impregnable fortifications. Most Phoenician cities, observing the rapid collapse of Persian resistance and Alexander's decisive victories, readily opened their gates to him, offering tribute and pledging allegiance. However, one city stood defiant: Tyre. This ancient, powerful city was built on an island just off the coast, protected by massive walls, a formidable navy, and its inhabitants' unyielding determination. The Tyrians believed their island fortress was impregnable, having famously resisted even Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon for 13 years. They refused Alexander's demand for surrender, daring him to take their city. Alexander, never one to back down from a challenge, viewed Tyre's defiance as both an insult to his authority and a strategic imperative. He could not leave such a powerful naval base uncaptured in his rear as he ventured deeper into Persian territory. In January 332 BC, he commenced the brutal siege of Tyre, a monumental engineering feat and a testament to his relentless will. He ordered the construction of a massive causeway, nearly a kilometer long and 60 meters wide, connecting the mainland to the island city. His engineers and soldiers labored under constant attack from Tyrian arrows and naval assaults, as they piled rubble, timber, and stones into the sea. The siege lasted for 7 grueling months, a testament to the Tyrians' resilience and the immense difficulty of the task. Alexander employed every known siege engine, from massive catapults and battering rams to siege towers mounted on ships. He also had to contend with clever Tyrian counterattacks, including fire ships and underwater obstacles. Ultimately, after immense effort and heavy casualties on both sides, Alexander's forces breached the city walls using siege towers brought in on the completed causeway and from the sea by his newly acquired fleet. The city fell in July 332 BC. In a horrific display of retribution for their defiance and the Macedonian losses, Alexander ordered thousands of Tyrian citizens massacred and the survivors sold into slavery. The fall of Tyre was a chilling demonstration of his ruthlessness when provoked, and it sent a clear message to any who considered resisting his might. After Tyre, Alexander continued his march south towards Egypt. The final obstacle on this route was Gaza, another formidable city fortress situated on a high mound, controlling the vital land route to Egypt. Its governor, Baatis, a eunuch, was equally resolute in his defiance, refusing to surrender to Alexander. The siege of Gaza proved to be another brutal and protracted affair. The city's defenses were exceptionally strong, perched on a steep hill and surrounded by thick walls. Alexander ordered the construction of a huge siege ramp to bring his engines level with the walls, a task even more challenging than the causeway at Tyre due to the height of the mound. After 2 months of relentless assault, and Alexander himself being wounded in the shoulder during the fighting, Gaza finally fell. The fate of Baptiste, the brave defender, was particularly gruesome. Enraged by the prolonged resistance and his own injury, Alexander reputedly had Bottas tied to a chariot and dragged around the city walls, mimicking Achilles' treatment of Hector's barbaric act that stood in stark contrast to his earlier clemency towards Darius's family. The entire male population of Gaza was put to the sword, and the women and children were sold into slavery. The fall of Tyre and Gaza effectively eliminated the last significant Persian strongholds on the Mediterranean coast, opening the gates to Egypt. These two brutal sieges showcased Alexander's tactical brilliance in siege warfare, his incredible perseverance in the face of daunting engineering challenges, and his chilling capacity for vengeance against those who dared to defy him. With the Levant now secured, Alexander could finally turn his attention to the ancient land of Egypt, where he would be received not as a brutal conqueror, but as a liberator and, soon, a living god. The next chapter of his journey promised a shift from the grim realities of siege warfare to the dazzling mystique of ancient civilization. Pharaoh of the Nile, crowned in Egypt, dreaming of Asia with the brutal sieges of Tyre and Gaza behind him, Alexander's path to Egypt lay open. Unlike the fierce resistance he encountered in the Levant, his arrival in Egypt in late 332 BC was met not with defiance, but with eager welcome. The Egyptians, having suffered under centuries of Persian rule, viewed Alexander as a liberator rather than another conqueror. They despised the Achaemenid dynasty, which had often disrespected their ancient traditions and religious practices. Alexander, ever the astute propagandist and respectful of local customs where it served his purpose, was quick to capitalize on this sentiment. He proceeded directly to Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt, where he was greeted with joyous acclamations. There, Alexander was formally crowned as Pharaoh of Egypt. This ancient ceremony, steeped in millennia of tradition, bestowed upon him not merely political authority, but also divine legitimacy in the eyes of the Egyptian people. He participated in religious rites and offered sacrifices to the Egyptian gods, demonstrating his respect for their pantheon. By embracing the role of Pharaoh, Alexander positioned himself as the rightful successor to a long line of Egyptian kings, inheriting their sacred duties and solidifying his rule without bloodshed. This was a masterstroke of cultural assimilation, contrasting sharply with his earlier ruthlessness, showcasing his remarkable adaptability as a leader. Having secured Egypt, Alexander turned his attention to a long-term vision. He recognized the strategic importance of the Nile Delta as a hub for trade between Europe, Asia, and Africa. In January 331 BC, he personally selected the site for a new city on the Mediterranean coast at a location near the small fishing village of Rhodotus. This city would become Alexandria, destined to be one of the greatest centers of learning and commerce in the ancient world. He meticulously planned its layout, envisioning broad streets, a grid system, and grand public buildings, designed to attract Greek settlers and Egyptian inhabitants alike. Alexandria would serve not only as a naval base, but also as a vital link in his vast empire, a testament to his foresight and ambition beyond mere military conquest. Its foundation underscored his ambition to leave a lasting mark, not just through destruction, but through creation and cultural exchange. While in Egypt, Alexander also undertook a perilous journey to the remote oasis of Siwa, home to the renowned oracle of Amun. This arduous trek across the desert, shrouded in an air of mystery and spiritual significance, was a deeply personal quest. The oracle of Amun was revered throughout the Greek world, and its pronouncements were believed to be infallible. Accounts vary regarding what transpired during his private consultation, but it is widely believed that the oracle affirmed his divine parentage, reportedly hailing him as the son of Amun. This divine endorsement profoundly impacted Alexander, strengthening his conviction that he was a demigod, a favored son of Zeus, Amun, destined for unparalleled achievements. This belief in his divine mandate would fuel his extraordinary courage and boundless ambition in the years to come, inspiring his troops and silencing any lingering doubts about his right to rule. With Egypt pacified, the city of Alexandria founded, and his divine status affirmed, Alexander was now free to pursue his ultimate goal: the complete subjugation of the Persian Empire and the capture of its fugitive king, Darius III. His time in Egypt, marked by peaceful consolidation and grand strategic planning, had prepared him for the decisive confrontation that awaited him. He had secured his rear, gained immense resources, and bolstered his legendary status. With the Mediterranean flank now firmly under his control, Alexander, his mind overflowing with dreams of further conquest, finally began turning eastward, preparing for the inevitable clash with Darius that would determine the fate of Asia. The stage was set for the greatest battle of his career, a confrontation that would forever alter the course of ancient history. Gaugamela, the decisive blow to Persia. Having secured Egypt and established the strategic city of Alexandria, Alexander prepared for the decisive confrontation with Darius III. He knew that to truly dismantle the Persian Empire, he had to defeat its king in a pitched battle, proving his supremacy once and for all. Darius, aware of Alexander's relentless advance, had not remained idle. He had assembled an even larger army than at Issus, gathering forces from the farthest reaches of his vast dominion, including war elephants and scythed chariots, designed to shatter the Macedonian phalanx. He meticulously chose the battlefield, a broad, open plain near the village of Gaugamela, not far from the city of Arbela, modern-day Erbil, Iraq. This terrain was deliberately chosen to allow the Persians to fully deploy their overwhelming numerical superiority and maximize the devastating effect of their chariots. In October 331 BC, Alexander's army, though significantly outnumbered, some ancient sources suggest a ratio of 10-1 in favor of the Persians, marched onto the plain of Gaugamela. Despite the daunting odds, Alexander displayed his characteristic confidence and tactical brilliance. He spent several days before the battle carefully studying the terrain, identifying potential traps Darius might have laid, and devising a plan to counteract the Persian numerical advantage. His generals urged him to attack at night, hoping to catch the Persians off guard, but Alexander famously refused, stating, "I will not steal my victory." He wished for a clear, decisive victory, one achieved by skill and courage, not by stealth. The Battle of Gaugamela was the largest and most complex battle of the ancient world to date, a masterpiece of Alexander's military genius. Darius commanded the Persian center, surrounded by his elite cavalry and infantry. Alexander deployed his army with ingenious flexibility. He positioned his flanks obliquely, anticipating and countering the Persian attempts to outflank him. His innovative tactics included an angled advance that drew the Persian cavalry away from their main infantry, creating a gap in the Persian center. The battle began with the terrifying charge of Persian scythed chariots, designed to break the Macedonian lines. However, Alexander's men had been trained to open their ranks, allowing the chariots to pass harmlessly through before closing in and overwhelming the drivers. While the flanks engaged in furious cavalry battles, Alexander, observing the opening he had created, launched his famous wedge formation with his companion cavalry, personally leading a devastating charge directly towards Darius's position. This audacious maneuver, aimed at the heart of the Persian command, proved decisive. Just as at Issus, the sight of Alexander's personal guard and elite cavalry bearing down on him caused Darius to panic. Despite his overwhelming numbers, the King of Kings, fearing capture or death, once again made the fateful decision to flee the battlefield. His flight, witnessed by his own troops, triggered a cascading collapse of the Persian army. The meticulously planned Persian lines disintegrated into a chaotic rout as soldiers abandoned their positions and fled for their lives. The pursuit of Darius was relentless, but the sheer size of the Persian army meant that many escaped. Nevertheless, the victory was complete. Gaugamela was the decisive blow to Persia, effectively shattering the military might of the Achaemenid Empire. Alexander had not only defeated Darius, but had utterly broken his command structure and morale. Following this monumental triumph, Alexander marched into the heart of the Persian Empire, capturing its great capitals. Babylon fell first, with its inhabitants welcoming Alexander as a liberator. Susa, another royal capital, followed, yielding immense treasures. Finally, Alexander marched on Persepolis, the ceremonial capital and symbolic heart of the Achaemenid Empire. Here, Alexander allowed his troops to plunder the city, and in a deeply symbolic act of vengeance for the Persian destruction of Athens during the Greco-Persian Wars, he ordered the ceremonial burning of the magnificent royal palace of Persepolis. This act, though debated by historians, unequivocally signaled the end of Persian dominance and the dawn of a new era. The mighty Achaemenid Empire, once the undisputed power of the East, had fallen. Alexander now stood as its master, but his ambition was far from satiated. Toward the ends of the earth, India and the turning point with the Persian Empire decisively conquered and its major capitals secured, Alexander had achieved the primary objective that had driven his campaign from the very beginning. Yet, his boundless ambition and insatiable curiosity spurred him onward. He now set his sights on lands even further east, driven by a desire to reach the ends of the earth and the great ocean stream believed by the Greeks to encircle the world. This new phase of his campaign would take him into the exotic and challenging subcontinent of India. The march into India began in 327 BC. Alexander's army, though seasoned by years of continuous warfare, now faced entirely new challenges: unfamiliar terrain, monsoon climates, and fierce resistance from numerous independent Indian kingdoms. The vast subcontinent was not a unified empire like Persia, but a mosaic of diverse states, each with its own formidable armies, often including terrifying war elephants, which the Macedonians had rarely encountered on such a scale. One of the most notable confrontations occurred at the Battle of the Hydaspes River, modern-day Jhelum River in Pakistan, in 326 BC. Here, Alexander faced King Porus, ruler of the Pauravas, a monarch of immense stature and formidable military skill. Porus commanded a powerful army, including a contingent of some 200 war elephants, which presented a terrifying sight. Alexander, once again displaying his tactical brilliance, employed a clever deception. He feigned multiple crossing attempts along the river, distracting Porus, before leading a significant portion of his army across a swift current under the cover of darkness and a heavy storm, miles upstream from the main Indian camp. The battle itself was one of Alexander's hardest fought victories. His cavalry had to contend with Porus's elephants, which initially wreaked havoc on the Macedonian ranks. However, Alexander's superior tactics, the discipline of his phalanx, and the courage of his cavalry ultimately prevailed. The Macedonian archers and javelin throwers targeted the elephant drivers, causing the beasts to become uncontrollable and turn against their own side. Despite the ferocity of the fighting, Alexander emerged victorious. Impressed by Porus's bravery and nobility in defeat, Alexander treated him with unusual respect, allowing him to retain his kingdom and even expanding his territories, a rare act of clemency that highlighted Alexander's appreciation for worthy adversaries. The victory over Porus, though costly, seemed to open the way for further conquest deeper into India. Alexander's ambition knew no bounds. He envisioned reaching the Ganges River and beyond. However, as the army pushed further east, facing incessant fighting, punishing monsoon rains, and the prospect of encountering even larger and more powerful Indian kingdoms, the morale of his weary veterans began to wane. They had been campaigning for nearly 8 years, fighting countless battles, and had marched thousands of miles from their homes. They were exhausted, homesick, and terrified by the reports of mythical beasts, and vast armies that lay ahead. At the Hyphasis River, modern-day Bees River, Alexander's relentless drive finally met an insurmountable obstacle: the will of his own men. His generals, led by Coenus, and the common soldiers openly mutinied. They refused to march further east. Despite Alexander's impassioned pleas, his arguments about glory and destiny, and even his threat to continue with only those who volunteered, the army's revolt was firm. This was a pivotal and heartbreaking turning point in Alexander's career. For the first time, his will, which had bent empires to its whim, was thwarted by the collective defiance of his own soldiers. Reluctantly, and with immense frustration, Alexander was forced to turn back. His dream of reaching the literal ends of the earth, the mythical ocean, was shattered. The return journey through the Gedrosian Desert, a brutal and unforgiving wasteland in modern-day Pakistan and Iran, proved even more devastating than the battles, claiming thousands of lives due to starvation, thirst, and exhaustion. This arduous retreat underscored the limits of even Alexander's extraordinary leadership. Though he had conquered vast territories and demonstrated unparalleled military genius in India, the mutiny at the Hyphasis marked the point where his human limitations and those of his men became undeniably apparent. The legendary Conqueror, now forced to retreat, began his long, final march back towards the heart of his colossal empire. The final march, death in Babylon, immortality in history. Having been forced to turn back from the Hyphasis, Alexander led his weary army on a grueling and costly return journey from India. The march through the Gedrosian Desert proved to be one of the most punishing episodes of his entire campaign, claiming more lives than many battles. The unforgiving landscape, extreme heat, and severe lack of provisions tested the limits of human endurance. Yet Alexander, sharing in the hardships of his men, once again demonstrated his remarkable leadership by sheer resilience. Upon reaching the relative safety of Persia, he began to reassert control over his vast empire, executing corrupt satraps and planning for the long-term governance of his immense domain. His vision for a unified empire, blending Greek and Persian cultures, began to take more concrete forms. He initiated the mass marriages of Susa in 324 BC, where thousands of Macedonian soldiers married Persian women, and Alexander himself took 2 more Persian princesses as wives, including Statera, a daughter of Darius III. He also planned to integrate Persian soldiers into his army and establish new cities, hoping to foster a truly Hellenistic world. However, these policies were often met with resistance and resentment from his Macedonian veterans, who clung to their cultural superiority and felt marginalized by his increasingly orientalized behavior. Alexander then made his way to Babylon, the ancient and majestic city, intending to make it the capital of his vast empire. It was here, in the spring of 323 BC, that he began to plan his next grand campaign, an invasion of Arabia, and possibly even further west into North Africa. His mind was still brimming with new conquests and ambitious projects, including improvements to the city's harbor and explorations of the Persian Gulf. However, the years of relentless campaigning, the physical toll of countless battles, the wounds sustained, and the increasingly heavy consumption of alcohol had irrevocably weakened his constitution. His body, once the embodiment of strength and vitality, began to fail him. In late May 323 BC, after a long night of feasting and drinking, Alexander fell ill. The precise nature of his illness remains a subject of intense historical debate, with theories ranging from typhoid, fever, malaria, or West Nile virus to various forms of poisoning. The fever was severe, and his condition rapidly deteriorated. As the days passed, it became clear that the great conqueror was facing a battle he could not win. His generals and close companions visited him, some weeping, others offering their last respects. The Macedonian army, distraught by the prospect of losing their beloved leader, was allowed to file past his deathbed. A silent procession of hardened warriors bidding farewell to the man who had led them to unparalleled glory. Accounts describe him barely able to speak, acknowledging them with a look or a gesture. On June 10 or 11, 323 BC, at the young age of 32, Alexander the Great passed away in Babylon. His death plunged his vast empire into immediate chaos. He had left no clear successor, and when asked on his deathbed to whom he bequeathed his empire, he reportedly whispered, "To the strongest," or to Craterus, or to the best and strongest. This ambiguity ignited decades of brutal wars among his generals, the Diadochi, who carved up his empire into several Hellenistic kingdoms. His legacy endured. He left behind not only a vast, albeit short-lived empire, but an idea, the idea of Hellenistic civilization. Alexander's conquests had fundamentally reshaped the ancient world, ushering in the Hellenistic Age, a period characterized by the widespread diffusion of Greek culture, language, and thought across the vast territories he had conquered. Greek became the lingua franca of the East, and Greek cities, customs, and art flourished from Egypt to India. His dream of a mixed, unified empire, though not fully realized in his lifetime, laid the groundwork for a new cultural synthesis that enriched both East and West. Alexander's life, though tragically cut short, remains one of the most astonishing stories of human ambition, military genius, and cultural impact. He taught the world that boundaries were meant to be pushed, that the impossible could be achieved through relentless will and unparalleled courage. He left behind a world forever changed by his brief, incandescent existence, a testament to the enduring power of a single individual to alter the course of history and achieve a unique form of immortality in history. You've just heard the remarkable journey of Alexander the Great, a man who reshaped the map of the ancient world with vision and unstoppable determination. Though his life ended at just 32 years old, his legacy continues to burn bright, inspiring dreamers and conquerors across centuries. Alexander was not just a king, he became a legend written into the fabric of history.